Hello, this is Writers at Work, a podcast for readers and writers about the joys, heartaches, challenges, and satisfaction of the creative writing process. I'm your host, Jim Fusilli. My guest on this episode of Writers at Work is Denise Mina, the much admired and much honored writer from Scotland. Denise is best known for her crime novels. The Good Liar, available now, is her latest, but that is but a part of her impressive resume. Her first novel, Garnethill, was published in 1998 to spectacular reviews here in the States and leading to the Garnethill trilogy. Then came Field of Blood, the first of Denise's novels featuring journalist Patty Meehan. It led to a crime series broadcast on BBC. Established as a superior crime writer, Denise began to have her plays performed on radio and in theaters. Her short story, Tamson, the tale of a grandmother trying to save her late daughter's child from her gangster's father, became her play of the same name. Peter Manuel, Meet Me, reimagines the true story of a man who spent 11 hours carousing with a serial killer. She's written comedies and documentary for TV. One of the latter was the investigation of the life of Edgar Allan Poe. Denise adapted Stieg Larsson's Millennium trilogy for a series of graphic novels, all that while continuing to write more than a dozen novels of her own set in different countries and different time periods. She seems never to have shirked from a challenge. Denise was inducted into the Crime Writer Association Hall of Fame. Denise and I belong to the same community of mystery novelists, yet I don't believe we've ever spoken. I'm really looking forward to doing so now. Denise Mina, welcome to Writers at Work.
Thank you so much for having me.
Denise, in overlooking your resume, I think what I want to talk to you about is career management.
Yeah.
Specifically how you choose your subjects and then how you decide in which medium they'd work. So let's start with the subject itself. How do you go about choosing what you want to write about?
Well, I really follow my nose, and I've been incredibly lucky in my career that I've just been able to choose what I'm interested in. And a couple of times I've had commissions, and I've done that. Ritzio was a commission for a lot of money for not a lot of words. And I thought, I can't turn this down. And I actually loved doing that job. But most of the time, I'm just choosing things because I'll say to the publisher, I have this idea for a book, and they'll say, go for it, and then I'll do it.
And do you get pushback ever? Denise, we need you to get back into your lane or anything like that?
Yeah, I think there is a lot of pushback, and obviously, if you're a commercial writer in any genre, they want you to just write the same book over and over again, the one that's sold. But one way round that is, I always think with publishers, it is a bit of a game, and they say we want you to write a massive mass market bestseller, and you say that's exactly what I'm going to do, and then you write a book backwards, and they say that's thank you so much for doing that. That's so it's so interesting, and then everyone pretends that's what everybody meant to happen.
There are musicians who have buttons on their instruments that don't do anything. When the producer says we need a different sound, the musician taps the button and the producer says, "Oh yeah, there it is." But
But at the same time, you do have to listen because we're making jam and they're selling jam and they know the jam market.
yes, yes,
You know what I mean? So if it's going to be a long-term proposition, then they're going to help you do that.
yeah. I think editors and publishers are invaluable partners. And they're taking a great risk.
Huge.
Yeah,
And sometimes they take a risk with you and it doesn't work out. And the peril is all on them really because they've already paid you advances and you know
right. And then they have to go into a meeting to justify the lost income.
yeah, yeah. And what I've done is I've sort of moved from publisher to publisher over here. I've always been with the same publisher in the States, more or less, but over here I've sort of gone from publisher to publisher, and I think they're much more amenable to you when you first moved there, doing something odd, which and accommodating you. as well. And it's a bit like going to a new hairdresser. If your hair's awful, they can always say that last hairdresser didn't know what they were doing. I understand your hair.
I like your use of the word commercial writers, as opposed to genre writer or popular fiction writer or something like that. I mean, I think that term expresses a reality.
Well, you know what, it is a reality, and I have a lot of friends in Scotland who are literary writers, and I love their work, but it's not making anybody any money.
Yeah. No, the responsibility to generate sales, it can be a motivating factor.
It can be a motivating factor, and also I think there has to be recognition that we are a community of writers, and some people write stuff that I don't particularly like, and it's not for me as a reader. But they're making a lot of money for publishing companies, and those publishing companies can, they make money and then they put it into us sometimes and take a chance with us.
Right. Now, you've written across various media. Um, do you know what medium you're going to be writing for when you begin thinking about a story, or does it become clearer to you as the story unfolds?
Well, interestingly, I've written things I wrote The Long Drop, I wrote as a screenplay. It didn't work. Then I wrote it as a play, and a lot of people in Glasgow stopped me and said, that could be much better. This is just like the audience stopped me and said, there's a better story in there. And then I made that into a novel. And so quite often I'll have an idea for a story and use it in different types of ways or to make different things. Or the kernel of an idea will come from writing a comic and it'll turn into a novel.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't really see them as different, you know?
You
I
don't.
think, no, I don't really. I see them, I mean, I see them all as different forms of things, but it's all narrative storytelling. And some things are good for plays, some things are good for a short story, some things I want to make into a novel, but it's only going to be a short story because nobody's that interested in, Quakers during the American Civil War, to be honest. No,
Right.
it's not, do you know what I mean? But I mean, I don't always think of the form when I'm thinking of the story, when I'm thinking of the narrative.
I see. I was fascinated by the way you adapted your short stories for theater. When you did that, did you see things in the story that you had missed the first time around?
And I think everything has a world in it. And if I come back, I mean, do you reread your work?
Yeah, no, unless a reader points out something to me that is so flabbergasting that I have to go back and see if it's actually in there. And inevitably it is. Inevitably the reader will say to me, what you really meant was,
Uh,
and then I
uh,
go back and I say, oh my God, she's right.
yeah, I'm a genius. I didn't know I was writing about that. But when every time you come back to work, it reads different, and I think every piece of work reads differently to every different reader because they bring the prism of their experience to it. And when I go back and read like a short story I wrote 2 years ago with the prism of now, it reads differently. So I think you're always finding things in stories or characters in stories that you're really interested in. So I wrote Rizzio about a Mary Queen of Scots being attacked by her nobles, and then when I was adapting it for a screenplay, I realised the really interesting character in this is a servant who comes up with a scheme for her to escape. And so the whole thing became about that character, but it was like 3 years later. And, these things develop over time, sometimes not even over time. Just it's a better story if it's not about a very well-known character.
Are you a news junkie? Do you follow the news?
Yeah. My cousin says I have the Irish complaint of being obsessed with current affairs. I follow the news obsessively.
Yeah. So the reason I ask is because sometimes a writer can become prescient. A writer doesn't even realize she's following trends and what's happening and where society's moving and can get out ahead of that.
Yeah,
You
I
know,
think
can
that's true.
and you write a story and then 2 years later, my goodness, that's exactly what happened.
What are you thinking about?
Uh, it, you know, um, God, let me see if I can come up with. Well, um, my first novel came out September 10th, 2001. therefore the
Mm.
day before 9/11. And readers have said to me, you depicted the New York that no longer exists. Well, I didn't set out to do that, but I was very fine about how I have to appreciate the environment and the setting.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
but it could be something related to politics. You could, which I have never done, but you can anticipate a movement, write something about it, and lo and behold, the movement happens.
I mean, I think that I wrote a book called Three Fires, which was about a populist uprising and government in Florence at the end of the Renaissance, or really like the middle of the Renaissance. And it is the populist uprisings that we've seen all over the world since then. But I mean, I think I was very aware of we are watching this happen, and the seeds of this are here. And Savonarola was the blueprint for all of that. We've seen that happen before. So, sometimes if you read a lot of history, sometimes you're watching current events and you suddenly think January the 6th is Rizzio, when
Yes,
a
yes.
whole lot of people invade a palace and suddenly they're in areas they're not supposed to be in, and the glee that they feel because they've broken this rule, the excitement of that, or a populist uprising in Florence where the rulers were overthrown and people were promised a whole lot of things and given them. They extended the vote massively. People started getting paid properly, but it was contingent on attacking Jews and gay people in Florence. And the unintended consequence of that was they disseminated Renaissance art to the whole world because anybody who was good at art was either gay or Jewish and had to run away from the city and go to Rome, go to France, and go and practice their art elsewhere. And that's how Renaissance art happened all over the world. I mean, I think sometimes you do see the seeds of things if you're reading, history, or if you're kind of very into the narrative of the way things happen, sometimes you do anticipate it. And what's lovely is when readers read your work and they say, I see that as well. I see that too.
Yeah, the way you put it, it leads, we always hear from emerging writers who say, where do you get your ideas? And of course, one of the answers is what's happening now is a fertile source for ideas. But the way you just put it, um, you can anticipate. One way to have an idea what to write about is to try to anticipate what may happen, but also, are there examples in the past of where something did happen that had the same sort of groundswell building that we have now? Yeah.
I think
Maybe,
we always look.
maybe not, Denise.
Please, God, not.
So, you've written a historical fiction, and you've written contemporary fiction with a link to modern activities, modern realities. Um, I guess that's one way that will dictate medium. I mean, you have to cope with lots of information that cannot be distilled and needs the sprawling atmosphere of a novel.
And then, but I mean, I think when we're looking at historical stuff, we're always looking at it through the prism of now. So, we're always thinking about it from our own perspective. And in the historical novels, they are sprawling, sprawling stories. As a crime fiction writer, I thought I want to approach this historical event by looking at it like a crime fiction novelist. So it's really only about that weekend when they attacked Mary, Queen of Scots in the palace. It's not about her predecessors. It's not about the consequences. It's not about what happened 2 years later. It's really just the events. And I wrote a Philip Marlowe book, a Raymond Chandler
Right,
book,
right.
and I'd also at the same time adapted a Brecht play. And I was so struck by the fact that all the scenes stand on their own. They don't, the characters don't have backgrounds, and that, you don't find out what happened to them in the war, or and there's something really delicious about that, about the immediacy of just being in the scene as a reader.
Yeah. Do you work on several projects at once?
Avoidance is my superpower. So if I've got a deadline for a novel, I'll write a play and it'll take me a week because I know I've got to get down to that novel. And all the time I'm writing the play, I'm thinking, yippee, oh God, I better get back to that novel.
Do you have a regular routine? I mean, do you block out a certain time every day? Do you have a certain place you like to write?
I'll write anywhere. I can write on planes. I can write on buses. I can, I mean, it's panic. It really is just blind panic because I was working in the theatre recently, and somebody asked the producer what was good about writing, working with crime writers, and he said they meet their deadlines.
Ah, fabulous, fabulous. But I do think it is a gift to be able to write anywhere. And
Yeah.
I mean, but can a writer develop that gift, do you think?
I think you can. I really do. I think we have this idea, but I think it comes from Byron. We think of writers, you mustn't be concerned about money. Be concerned about money. Somebody is concerned about the money value of your work. So get an agent and be concerned about money. You must everybody must attend to your needs. Never mind that. There's no good writing going to come out of that. You need to be making dinners for people. You need to be having gangs of teenage boys over and making them pizza. You need to be involved in the world doing voluntary work. Get out there. Don't say to yourself, I can only write in a special place. It's just a difficult thing to do. It's going to be difficult whether you're on a plane or whether you're on in a special room or if you're in a residency in a castle. Just get on with it. Don't make a big fuss about it.
Yeah. When did you decide you were going to be a writer?
Oh my God. I mean, that's like saying, when did you decide you were going to be a pop star? I just thought that was something everybody wanted to do. I still can't believe I'm a writer. I've been doing it for 30 years. I still can't believe that I get to do this every day. And
Well, was
but
there
oh,
a moment, I'm sorry, was there a moment like when you were a child and you realized that that thing you loved called a book was actually produced by a person?
I didn't read when I was a kid.
Ah,
I couldn't read until I was about 10 because we lived in France and Holland. So I was learning lots of different languages. But I mean, I couldn't read. And then I learned to read. And I thought, well, reading is obviously for brainy kids and kids that don't smoke very heavily. It was a different time. And, and then I went on a Girls Gone Wild holiday by mistake. And the girls were going wild. And I was like, I really don't think this is a wise form of holiday making. I thought we could go and look at some ancient churches in Greece. So I stayed basically in the hotel on the roof. And my friend had brought 100 Years of Solitude and The Master and Margarita. And I had the best holiday of my life. I just sat and read the whole time. I never read before then. We didn't have a TV in the room or anything. And that's when I really got into reading. And I thought, and I was reading Tale of Two Cities and I was sweating at the chase scene. And I thought, imagine being able to do that over 100 years ago. Somebody wrote this passage and it's making my heart race. What a wonderful thing it would be to be a writer. But I mean, it was like saying it'd be nice to be an astronaut. I didn't
yeah,
think people like me could do that. And then, all my life I kind of thought, well, I'm lecturing law, but what I really want to be is a writer. And then I thought you need to commit to being a law lecturer and get this fantasy out of your head, or you're not going to actually do any good academic work. So I wrote a novel and it got published, and that was Garnethill.
yeah. And was it once you decided to be a writer, what was the appeal of crime fiction?
I love crime fiction because I think crime writing and sci-fi really are the social novels of today. So I don't know if you have Penguin Classics over there. Do
We
you have
do.
those?
Yes, we do.
So I mean, I didn't really know anybody that read because I was a waitress. So I mean, I just bought all of those books and read them, and that was my sort of English literature degree, and really read them in alphabetical order. So
Ah,
by the time I got to Zola, I was like, oh, clearly French 19th century social novels are the thing. And crime fiction seemed to me to be the thing that was talking about politics and it was talking about power and it was talking about all the really important stuff. And so that's
yeah,
kind of why I wanted to do. And also, I think there's something about, do you want to write pop music or do you want to write classical music? Because they hit different. And the audience are much more empowered with crime fiction. If it's not good, the audience will put it down if it doesn't hold their attention. And I like art forms that are regarded as, not ponderous and not serious. So I love true crime and I love true crime documentaries and podcasts and pop culture stuff. I think that's who I want to talk to.
I love that analogy. When my first couple of novels came out, I honestly tell you, I didn't know what I was doing. I can't believe they were published because I didn't know what I was doing. Um, and I always thought of the novel as a folk song. And then I found out that novels are not, they're symphonies.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that they're laborious or that you must suffer them. In fact, symphonies can be much more exciting than a simple folk song. But now you have once you open your mind to the possibility that you have all of these assets that you can use. You have the full symphony you can use in your writing. It's just a wonderful moment of revelation.
That's such a lovely analogy. And, with a symphony, you can hear it over and over again, and it hits a different note every time. You hear different parts every time. And it's so layered and it'll live with you for the rest of your life. I love that. And so, did you not think that, what did you think when you were first writing? Just that you just wanted to, was it a compulsion? Was it just, you didn't think of it as a career?
No, very long story short, on the way back from my honeymoon, my wife said to me, "I have high expectations of you," which
Okay.
was kind of shocking to me. And I thought, well, what can I do to meet these high expectations? I'm a terrible musician, and I'm a songwriter, but nobody's buying my songs. And I like being a journalist, but the world doesn't need many rock critics. Um, so I said to her, I'm going to be a novelist. And
Wow.
she said, okay. And 13 years later, my first novel came out. So she was very patient with me. But I wanted to communicate. Once I started writing novels, I realized this is a way to have a communication with readers where you can tell readers what's important to you, and they will either respond or not respond. But it's and the complexity of the novel appealed to me also, and which actually leads me to a question I wanted to ask you. I developed affection for my characters. I miss some of my characters. Um, do you have affection for your characters?
I mean, they are people I went to school with. I actually, when Facebook first came out, I looked up Maureen O'Donnell, who's a character in my first books, and I was looking up lots of different people that I used to know. And then I thought, oh God, I realized, God, I made her up. She's not real. I've tremendous affection for them, and they feel like building blocks in my personality. They do feel like people I knew and spent a lot of time with, and I had really positive encounters with.
Yeah,
Yeah, they feel really seminal to me.
yeah. This is, I think, is the appeal of the reoccurring character. Now you've spent a lot of time with Maureen O'Donnell,
Yeah, a lot of time.
and you've seen her grow or take missteps.
Yeah.
And what about Patty Meehan? You still think of Patty Meehan?
I think of Paddy all the time, and every time I read anything about a newspaper shutting down or, what's happening in the new, I don't know how it is over there, but the newspaper industry over here is, collapsing. Or every time I meet somebody who used to be a journalist and now sells bikes, I think about Paddy and how Paddy's getting on. I miss her all the time.
That suggests that there may be another Patty Meehan book inside you.
There's supposed to be another two Paddy Meehan books that I never got round to writing, and I'll tell you why. I moved publisher, and the backlist was with my previous publisher, and they said, "Well, look, could you just give us another book um, between now until we get the backlist?" And by the time they got the backlist, I'd already started on the Alex Morrow books, and I was so into them that I did that whole series. And by the time I'd finished, I just never got back round to Paddy Meehan.
I see. I as I was forming the questions, I noticed that I had used the past tense to refer to Maureen O'Donnell, Patty Meehan, and Alex Morrow. But that's probably wrong, correct? I mean, they probably still exist in your mind and also in readers' minds.
But I mean, they do exist for me, and you know, I feel quite strongly that you know, a lot of readers write to me about them all the time. So, you know, I think they're pretty current people. But if you live in Glasgow, those women are all really knowable here. You know, you meet people and you think, oh God, you're just like Maureen O'Donnell. Oh no, she's not real. Or, you know, you're just like Patty Meehan.
Do do
And I
do,
get,
do you like
sorry.
all? Do, no, do you like? Are you happy with the lot in life you gave those three women?
I wish I'd given Paddy a better ending because I feel like because I haven't written those books, maybe she's become quite bitter. And I feel like more in my head, Maureen O'Donnell is running a hotel in the Highlands and she's vaping and she's really happy. Everything's sorted out. You know, she's an auntie. She's got lots of nieces and nephews. I mean, I feel like I know exactly what happened to all of them, even if it's not on the page. And yeah, I mean, I am really happy for them. And, you know, I'm sure they've gone on to other misadventures, but, you know, where I left them, I'm glad.
Yeah, I remember reading a book recently. I was trying to remember. Oh, it was a Roddy Doyle book. Yeah, and I remember thinking, oh, don't do that to her, please. You know, you've done quite enough. You know, let her have this moment of happiness. And I mean, I guess for a writer, that's there it is. That's the moment you want.
Yeah, that's exactly what you want your readers to feel.
You know, you mentioned a couple of things earlier that I found fascinating. The Darkland Tales. Um, and you mentioned your episode, The Mary Queen of Scots. First of all, this wasn't this such a clever idea by the publisher?
Publisher, it was a guy called James Crawford. He's a writer and he's a bit of a genius, this guy. And I had already started commissioning people on behalf of a publisher to write true crime novellas. So I almost didn't do it because I thought this is too similar to the true crime thing I'm doing. But it was lockdown, and you know, I don't know if you remember early lockdown, how
Yeah,
incredibly anxious we all were.
right.
Um, and I thought I could just I could sit here and feel anxious, or I could just write a book. So I wrote that book, and that came out. It was like it was the first of the Darklands series, but that was all Jamie Crawford. And what he wanted to do was get contemporary writers to write historical episodes in Scotland's history, because really a lot of the history of Scotland it was written a long time ago by a Canadian called John Preble. And he wrote fantastic books that are very out of date. I mean, they're quite misogynistic and, you know, it's a real colonial mindset, those stories. So he wanted to do a sort of episodic history and get everybody to write to their strengths. He chose the episode of Rizzio. I didn't really know anything about it.
Really?
Yeah, no, really didn't know that much about it. You know, my family are Irish Catholic Republicans. And so whenever I hear anything about Mary Queen of Scots, I just think, oh, that's just some old royal thing. That's nothing to do with the likes of us. But I mean, it's just such a great story, and you know, it's so kind of emblematic of politics in a small place. And but he was the one that chose it, so I think he's chosen everybody else's episodes,
He
and
has. Wow.
people are now petitioning to write those books.
Well, I mean you have the best writers from a country reimagining stories for the country's history and their legends and their myths. I mean, this could apply to what, a dozen, 2 dozen countries.
I mean, it's a great idea, isn't it?
Yes, let's steal
Yeah,
it. I'm stealing
steal
it.
it and do it. Steal it and do it.
Okay, bye. I'm going.
I mean, Jamie Crawford has written a lot of nonfiction. He wrote a book about borders. I mean, he's just a really oblique thinker. He's such an interesting person. He presents a radio program now. He's like Tony Wilson. I don't know if you know Tony
I
Wilson, who
don't. No.
no, Tony Wilson was a daytime TV star who also produced New Order and Joy
Oh
Division
my.
and
Good
was the
Lord.
kind of godfather of Manchester
Yes.
alt rock. So he had this kind of, you know, very mainstream life, but also this, he was like a hellmouth of creativity in Manchester at the same time. So I mean, it would be like Stephen Colbert kind of running a sort of contemporary art gallery. It's like that is that kind of vibe. But Jamie Crawford's a fascinating man. I could put you in touch with him if you want to
S-
talk to him
s-
about that. He's an amazing
s-
guy.
wow. Wow. And so then um, comes Three Fires, set in 15th century Florence. Um, you generated that book. That was your idea?
Rizzio did so well. They said, "Would you like to write another historical book?" And I thought, because you won't believe this, but the people who were not crime writers who wrote those books didn't meet their deadline, and because they're not incredibly anxious. And so, so my book came out first and sold unbelievably well. And then the other books started coming out, and they said, would I like to write another one? And I thought, well, I can't write another Scottish historical book because it'll look as if I'm taking over the series. And these other writers are writing brilliant episodes. So what if I did it in, what if I set it in, what if I did Savonarola, who is, very much overlooked because he's so humorless. And he lived in Florence at the same time as the Medici, who are like all jazz hands and gold leaf.
Right, 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 right.
Yeah.
Now,
So, but
so
it was originally a radio commission to write 5 episodes of a story that would be out on every night on basically NPR over here.
yeah.
And so I wrote the story of Savonarola written in the voice of PG Woodhouse.
Ah.
And because it is a funny story because no one's giggly in it, but a lot of people are quite hysterical. And then I thought I could just print that and that could be that, but I couldn't do that. It took an awful, awful lot of work and a lot of rewriting. So, but that's how that came about.
But it's such a fascinating period in the history of art because we're moving from the Renaissance into the Baroque period, and which is utter turmoil intellectually. Um, Florence is just about beginning to lose its um, surrender its title to Rome, largely because of the emergence of Bernini. But yes, those people took themselves extremely seriously.
So it was Puritanism. So it's the start of the Reformation. And before that, Florence is where the Renaissance happens. And because Savonarola takes over, expels all the artists and basically turns it into Protestant hell. And there's no theatre, there's no nothing. And but they are trying to do some good things. But the reason that Baroque happens is because Michelangelo leaves for Bologna initially. He was about 17 or something like that. And then he went to Rome. And he said when he was 80, he could still hear Savonarola's voice in his head. It was so scary.
My God.
Yeah.
So you can't travel to the 15th century, but you can travel to Florence, and you can see things that were there in the 15th century. Did are you that type of writer? Do you go where you're writing about?
Well, again, this was lockdown. So
Oh, yes, of
I
course.
couldn't.
Of
But I
course.
went afterwards. And there's a bit in Somerset Maugham's book of Human Bondage when he goes to Paris and he sits in the Champs-Élysées and he orders an absinthe. And it is that he's writing about that experience of being in a world that you've already imagined. Like when you go to
Yeah, sure.
somewhere that they've filmed your favorite film, or you go to Philadelphia and you go to the Rocky Steps. We've all
Yes.
done that.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'd already written the book and I'd already done all the research, and I got to go to Florence afterwards, and I was giddy for weeks because
Yes, yes.
it's so unchanged. It's exactly the same.
Yeah, I remember speaking to I was working on a book set uh, in 16th century Rome, and I was walking up the steps of the Vatican. Um, and of course, through Google Maps, I had been there a number of times. I had been there in many, many years earlier. But as I was walking up the steps, I I had two moments of awareness. One was that I could smell the Tiber,
Yeah.
and the second was that I could hear the seagulls.
Wow.
And unless you go, you don't know that.
You don't know that. You don't know that, and you don't know the heat, and you don't know this feeling, and you don't. But what an amazing, because it's like you're there twice or
Right,
three times because
right.
there's the imagined place and the physical place, and what a privilege to get to go to these places, though.
Yes. And this is where our responsibility to readers is so important. You know, we cannot cheat the reader by not including that kind of detail.
Yeah, and Google Maps is useful, but it doesn't do it.
Correct, correct.
Yeah, yeah.
And you know, if you're writing about a highway that's surrounded by trees, okay, everybody's seen a tree, but maybe these are pine trees,
Hmm.
and you can smell them from behind the wheel. And what a difference that makes to readers, don't you think?
Oh yeah, I mean we've all been readers. That I mean that we all start as readers, and just we all have those moments where you physically feel a city growing up around you when you're reading something that's really engaging. And I always think of reading as sort of mental health care. It's like you've got a door in the back of your head and you can step out of the present and what's going on with you and into Narnia in this story. And the more believable it is, the more profound the time away from your head is.
Yeah. When you were asked to do the Marlowe book, um, did I mean were you hesitant?
I was hesitant and I made them let me write a chapter and submit it to see if they thought I could do the voice. Then there were loads of choices to make. I mean, I'm such a Chandler fan. And he was so seminal to me as a writer. And I thought, I mean, I could do this, but is it this book Marlowe? Is it that book Marlowe? Is it later Marlowe? Is it early Marlowe? And then I thought, well, what do I, as a reader, love about these books? And I tried to sort of bring all those things together. But there were so many choices to be made.
Yeah.
And I had to sort of decide what my responsibility was in that. Two other Chandler fans,
Yeah.
you know?
Do you remember when I don't know, you might be a little bit too young for this, when Robert B. Parker did Poodle Springs? Do you remember this? This Robert B.
Okay,
Parker.
I haven't read that. I haven't read it.
Yeah, Bob helped me out early in my career, and so I always had a deep, and I still do, deep affection for him. But I remember thinking, oh, don't Bob, don't do this. You know,
Yeah.
don't do it. And people liked it. It became a movie. Um, but there's just so much you can get wrong because well, this may not be true in 2025, but my experience is that people who love Chandler own Chandler. They don't want
Hmm.
you to mess with their Chandler. You
Yeah,
know,
I think that's true.
it's like telling a Beatles fan, that wasn't George on guitar, that was Paul. They don't want to know that, you know.
Yeah.
They, but I saw Jim Patterson's quote about you. Denise Mina is an even better writer than Raymond Chandler. She's a I mean, that could be seen as blasphemy, but no, I don't think that is blasphemy. I think Chandler had his time and was essential to his time.
Well, you know what my mission was? Because I love Chandler so much, I thought young people are not reading Chandler. Young women are not reading Chandler. And there is so much to steal there. And I wanted to write a book with a woman's name on it so that young women would start reading Chandler again because I love him so much. And also, he's homophobic, he's very racist. There are lots of reasons not to read him. And you can say to people, don't be woke. You can say, don't care about those minorities. Those minorities are book buyers, and that's how a name gets remembered. And, one of the things is if you want to be remembered as a writer, do what Charles Dickens did, which is have a lot of unemployable children who will keep your estate alive. I mean, the whole book is about an estate. Chandler didn't have kids. There is no one to keep his estate alive apart from fans,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
So it's down to us.
And in terms of Chandler's writing, I don't know if this is an exact analogy, but it might be. I don't know if Ray Charles is still popular in Scotland or
Oh,
was.
yeah.
Okay, you listen to those Ray Charles albums. And sometimes the production is terrible, the arrangements are terrible, there's too many people singing, there's too many strings playing, but at the heart of it is Ray Charles and his
Mm.
voice. And I think of that with Chandler, in that there's a lot going on that is fluffery, and a lot of his writing is a little bit showy. But boy, when he's spot on, he is dead center.
I mean, isn't that all we can hope for, all of us? Because it is a bit shonky. But he was, I mean, he wasn't inventing a genre, obviously, because, he was doing uh, Dashiell Hammett. He was copying him, you
And
know,
him and Hemingway.
and Hemingway. Well, I think Hemingway gets credit that he's not actually Jew. I'm going to be honest with you. I
Yeah,
think he
please.
he gets credit for inventing an American style. Now, Hammett was a Pinkerton man, and Hammett wrote in the style of Pinkerton House report styles. So they had a style sheet, and it was no adverbs, short sentences. Don't tell me how you feel. Give me the facts. And that is noir fiction. And then Hemingway does it. I mean, it's like Edgar Allan Poe gets credit for inventing crime fiction. Poe didn't invent crime fiction. A whole lot of middle-aged women in New Zealand invented crime fiction, actually. But there's always like some middle-class guy who went to university who gets credit for everything. And I do love Hemingway, but I don't think he invented that style. I don't think that was, unique to him. I think it was just he's the kind of front-facing progenitor of that.
I had no idea about Hammett and the Pinkerton reports. That is fascinating.
Oh my God. And there's loads of Pinkerton books. I mean, Pinkerton became so unfashionable because he was so right wing. He's from Glasgow. Do you know that?
No, I did not.
He's from the Gorbals. And
Denise, I was a
sorry.
Pinkerton. I was a Pinkerton.
No.
Now, it sounds a lot, not my last book, the previous book, I wrote about being a teenage teamster, which I was. I was a teenage teamster. It sounds very dramatic, but in fact, I worked in the office. So when I say I was a Pinkerton, I was a security guard at a football stadium.
Still
But
though.
we have to sell it, though, we have to sell it.
It's great.
But so now finally you get back to present day Scotland. Was that kind of relief for you to get back into the world in which you live?
Well, I mean, I think every book feels like the only book you've ever written. Would you agree? I don't
Wow.
know. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah,
I just,
I really have to say, Denise, you've blown my mind like 5 times during this interview. I'm gonna have to listen to it. But yeah, I guess you're right. I guess you're right.
it feels like the only world you've ever inhabited. And sometimes you pick up a book that you wrote 10 years ago and you're like, wow, I don't remember any of this.
Wow. So in The Good Liar, which I actually finished yesterday, and thank you for the writing that. Um, the story turns on your protagonist's need to tell the truth,
Yeah,
and that a year earlier, she, a well-regarded spatter expert,
that's,
aired in her testimony. Well, how did that idea come to you?
I was watching The Staircase. I don't know if you've seen this documentary series about,
Yes, I have. I have.
and the forensic evidence is wrong. And the man has been sent to prison, not only on the basis of that. I mean, I personally, I think he's guilty as sin, but I did forensic science at university 30 years ago, and almost everything that we were taught is now regarded as junk science.
Really?
People are in prison because of that. But we like to think of science as, static, the way law is static, but it's a developing discipline. There are always going to be new discoveries, but we want it to be absolute and we want it to be static. And it isn't. It just isn't.
Yeah. And the way you wrote this book, it's almost entirely told in flashback. Um, because of the way you begin the story and how then you unfold it for us. But the funny thing is, I didn't realize that until I was late in the book. So you've somehow managed to write a book reliant on flashback, and yet it has a constant forward pull to it. Were you writing?
Sorry, what did you say there? You broke up
You
a
know,
bit.
yeah, The book begins with your protagonist telling us she's going to tell the truth.
Yeah.
But then
And
you have to show us what the truth is.
well, I mean, it's sort of two time frames, one of them very languorous and one of them very short. One of them is 20 minutes and it runs all the way through the book. And it's her
Right.
walking up to the podium and she has to commit to whether or not she's going to tell the truth about what actually happened and that she got that wrong. So it's like standing up and admitting you made a mistake. And the consequences of that are terrible. And the other time frame is the actual case that she's talking about and that she gave evidence in and
Right.
that her elbow was nudged in. So, when you're writing a book and you need an A story and a B story, it was a way of playing with that by having two different time frames that sort of intersect and creating tension, narrative tension, by having those two time frames be, over different courses of time and but speaking to each other.
Yeah, I think though, and a little flattery here, I think in lesser hands, uh, certainly I as a reader would have said, wow, I got to get back to that other story. But no, I never felt that. I felt that the book pulled forward the entire time.
That's great. That's lovely.
Yeah. And
Love to hear that.
I love that you use the ticking clock instead of chapter headings on occasion. I think what is it, 8:38, and then it's 8:41, and
Yeah.
yeah. So and another thing I love, and then I think it's very hard to do, is you created a quietly shocking scene, and I think I can say what it is without giving too much away. A suspect, a ne'er-do-well son of a murder victim, turns up at the memorial service wearing his late father's suit and watch. That to me was really shocking, Denise.
Really?
I mean, you made him sound like he was um, a little bit flighty and maybe a bad guy and unreliable, but what a statement. You, the audience,
Happened that
suspect,
happened in a case. That happened in a case here.
really.
The guy wore his dad's watch and his dad's shoes. And I mean, it is shocking.
It's yes, but I love the idea of these kind of the writer has such trust in the reader that they don't have to blow the trumpets. They can just kind of slip this in there so the reader can go like, I love when that happens.
Yeah.
And then it gives a really vengeful, ugly eulogy.
I was thinking about Princess Diana dying and her brother giving that talk in Westminster Abbey about how everyone was wrong and how discordant that kind of eulogy is,
Yeah.
and how much we all remember that. And that a lot of people have very fraught relationships and people die, but they lie. And it's the reason for that, I think, is it's really important to leave space for other people to have their relationships with the person
Mhm.
who's passed away, even if you didn't like them.
Yeah.
But he's not prepared to lie, and he's not prepared to um, make space for other people.
Yeah. Your book is 254 pages. And you present the truth in the protagonist's words on page 253. So that was very sinister on your behalf, Denise. But I mean, nobody could stop before then. We had to. A lot of we see nowadays in all sorts of literary endeavors, the excess chapter. The denouement that isn't really necessary. But in your book, we had to go all the way to the end.
You find as you write, the more you write, your books get shorter
Yeah, because you learn technique. I mean,
because you're better.
you're
Your
better,
books, your books should get shorter.
right? And also, they should end when they end. If you
Yeah.
look at those old noir films from the 40s and early 50s, once the crime is solved, the movie ends.
Oh,
there's not
you know,
another.
Graham Greene and Patricia Highsmith wrote during a period of paper rationing. So they could only write 170 pages. And it's the right size for that story.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
couldn't bang on for another third.
No. And I think you would have diminished the impact of the closing few pages had you tacked on another 20 pages. Because there
Yeah.
it was, the story was done.
Well, I'll be honest with you, I had tacked on another 20 pages, but my editor made me take it out.
So I know we've been going on for a long time here, but I have to ask you about Sir Evan Evans, that you describe as the dullest man in London. We hope to avoid writing dull characters, yet you did so deliberately. How do you write the dullest man in London?
I have a lot of friends who, when they read him, they were like, this is just about class and how much he hates upper class people. And then the story goes on, and he's actually a really good guy and
Right.
does quite a brave thing. Yeah, I love Evan Evans.
I usually ask our guests what's next, but with you, it could be anything, Denise. I mean,
Will I blow
so,
your mind again?
so you're right. So what is next for Denise Mina?
Well, I'm writing a play of Rizzio that's going on at the Edinburgh Festival next year. And the long drop is being staged in Glasgow at the Citizens Theatre next year as well. And I'm starting a series that's just fun. I just want this to be a complete romp. And it's about a woman who inherits a private detective agency, and she doesn't know which cases to turn down. Because if you talk to any private eyes, they'll always say there are cases you just do not take, but she doesn't really know what to not take, and she gets in a lot of trouble. And it's called NDA. So it's about all those cases that you never hear about, but you slightly suspect are happening in the background behind the TMZ headline.
This is great. This is great. My guest on this episode of Writers at Work has been Denise Mina, who has amid an admirable and wildly diverse career, um, as among our best and most ambitious crime writers. Denise, thanks so much. I had a great time.
Fun. Thank you so much. That was lovely.
Writers at Work is a production of Bliss Publications. Erin Mitchell is our producer. Music is by Joni Mitchell, performed by Keith Jarrett. For more, see writersaTworkpodcast.com. I'm your host, Jim Fusilli. Until next time, happy reading.